October 19th of 2024, screams are heard in the streets, social networks are full of controversy, and the faith in humanity of thousands of people seems to have been extinguished in an instant, as everyone wonders if our society is so deteriorated, so corrupt, that the only thing keeping us afloat are horrible sequels like this.
Many people dislike the Joker sequel, right?
No, I was talking about the Celebrity House. Were you watching that thing?
Nope. Are you sure? Because I kind of heard you...
Say no more, distressed young man, you're right.
I knew. No.
Someone just killed the Joker movie box office, blah blah blah. As I said, this case is extremely enigmatic. The first Joker film, which premiered in 2019, grossed over $1 billion at the box office with a budget of only $55 million, which is quite rare in Hollywood. Not only that, but the film became a cultural phenomenon that for some strange reason made thousands of people feel identified and idealized the character. On the other hand, the sequel has had a disappointing box office, and some internet sites have even labeled it as the worst superhero movie in history.
It's ridiculous. Nobody makes me...
Sub-Zero, I mean Madam Web. But the big question is, who is to blame? That's what we're going to find out today, as there are many suspects involved in this horrible crime, and it's our job to figure out what happened.
Well, you do know that work implies salary, right?
First we need the closets, young man in distress. First we need the closets, that's not from the other. Then accompany me to this case that I call the death of a sad clown.
The geek monitor.
In 2016, director Todd Phillips began to consider the idea of creating a movie based on a comic book character. However, unlike what was usually seen in other franchises like Marvel, his idea was to create a low-budget film that focused more on drama and less on action. So he wanted to focus on the character of Joker, something that seemed quite interesting to the then president of Warner, Toby Emmerich, because they wanted to have a movie that focused on exploring the deep psychology of a character. Really what Emmerich decided to give Phillips a chance since the director had generated great profits for the studio with his Hangover trilogy. Resurrection in Las Vegas for the Spanish audience.
If that's funny, listen to this. You're still paying 18 pesos for prints, right?
I mean, yes, and it's definitely a ripoff, but I'm not talking about that. So, do you want to know something very funny about the Joker tape? Although the first tape was approved for its interesting and low-cost proposal, Warner had little faith that a Joker tape without Batman, special effects, and a plot more focused on drama than action would succeed. So they invited several companies to invest in the movie and not assume all the risk. To everyone's surprise, this tape grossed more than 18 times its budget at the box office, money that Warner had to distribute among all the investors. But wait, it gets better. Since Warner was confident that Joker or Mêlée du Fromage would be a complete success,
To the Folie.
that's what I said, dude. He practically invested all the sequel's money intending to keep the juicy profits. And how did it turn out? Well, I guess that's how it was. It was a huge blow for Warner, as no one could believe that the sequel to Joker, a movie that was a phenomenon in 2019, would open with such low numbers, even being surpassed by box offices of films like The Flash or even the Marvels. But how did this happen?
Let's first analyze the most controversial points of the film to see what was the murder weapon, and then we'll see who was the mastermind of this crime. The first point that raised doubts in the public was when it was announced that the long-awaited sequel would be a musical. But musicals are really nice. I also love them, but there are many people, particularly the target audience of what was Joker 1, who do not enjoy this genre. They feel that the story is put on pause while people inexplicably dance and sing. Well, maybe they have not taken into account that the melodies and motifs tell us things about the situation, the characters, and what the plot does not tell us in a concrete way.
Who is your channel mine? Besides, it's not so relevant here since several of the musical numbers in the Joker sequel do not fully exploit these elements of the musical that you mention and end up being sequences that, personally, I feel do not contribute much to the plot. Do you think the murder weapon were the musical themes? Surprisingly, Warner seemed very interested in hiding the fact that this film would be a musical, to the point that none of the trailers mention it. However, it's a common practice, as recent musical films like Mean Girls or Wonka also seem to conceal this detail in their trailers. I still don't know why so much hatred for musicals. Many believe musicals tend to underperform at the box office. However, these two movies I mentioned ended up being hits, as Mean Girls grossed 3 times its initial budget while Wonka grossed 5 times its budget. In the case of Joker, Moulin Rouge, there were complaints that the movie was a musical but nothing compared to the end of the film.
Now come spoilers for the movie Joker blah blah blah. I mean, Folie, dude, you've already stuck it to me.
Joker 2 has an ending that most people hated, where Arthur is shown not as a criminal genius or as an agent of chaos who inspired a whole social revolution, but as a man of low intelligence, emotionally dependent and deeply disturbed. Which was seen by many people as a kind of betrayal, as if the sequel had betrayed the essence of the first film. Not only that, but in the end a symbolic death is given to the character of Joker, at the moment of the trial where Arthur says that Joker does not exist. And we also see the literal death of Arthur at the hands of another Arkham prisoner, who ends the film by making a smile on his face. All this ending feels like an anti-discourse of the first film. And it was definitely the murder weapon that killed this sequel, a weapon that acquired immense power through the spoilers that leaked on social networks before the premiere of the film, since the most heard comment was the following: in the end, we are told that Arthur was a nobody and that he was eliminated by the real Joker. This oversimplification of the end. Many people who didn't see Joker accepted this view, which I don't share, as the phrase conveyed great disappointment. Curiously, there are more movies commenting on Joker's ending than people who actually saw it.
If those commenting on Joker's quality had seen the movie, it would indeed be a success for him, wouldn't it? It's like Shrek, they judge him without knowing him.
It's perfectly fine to not watch a movie. In the end, we as consumers decide through our purchases what we want and don't want to see. However, taking someone else's interpretation of an ending that can be interpreted in several ways was the final blow that killed the movie. Because there was no room for people to form their own opinion about the movie, and whether Arthur was really this anarchist criminal genius that people saw in the first movie, or just a socially marginalized person seeking acceptance and belonging as the second one resolves. The interesting thing about all this is that it seems as if the sequel was intended to alienate its entire base audience. In fact, when an anonymous source close to Warner Brothers was asked who this movie was aimed at, they simply said, "For Joaquin." With all the controversy of Joker 2, you're probably wondering who was the madman who approved such a film. That is, someone in Hollywood gave Todd Phillips $200 million to make a movie that managed to anger all its base fandom. I mean, he made a musical with Lady Gaga where the protagonist, after being abandoned by his girlfriend.
In other words, Todd Insel's nightmare. But why did they give him the money?
Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdi, co-presidents of Warner Brothers, were responsible for greenlighting this film. It should be noted that they essentially had no alternative. Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix originally didn't plan on creating a Joker sequel. However, a recent report suggests Joaquin dreamt up the idea for a musical sequel exploring Arthur Fleck's life after the events of the Joker film. Joaquin went to Todd, he liked the idea, and they went to Warner to present it. Initially, they wanted to do a musical play, but $40 million later, $20 million for each one, with a clear artistic motivation on their part. And $20 million each. They agreed to a movie, with Joaquin and Todd retaining full creative control over the project. And $20 million each, which tells us that Michael and Pamela had two options. Not to make the Joker sequel or make it without Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix. Can you imagine how that news would have been received? And let's not forget that, all things considered, Phillips is a director who has given Warner great commercial successes through proposals that don't sound entirely conventional. Nobody thought about yesterday's events? Nobody thought that Joker, a low-budget film, would become the third highest-grossing film in the history of DC Comics, only behind Aquaman and The Dark Knight Rises. The Hollywood Reporter suggests that greenlighting this sequel was a risky move due to its style, according to sources close to the film industry. But it was the right thing to do. Because otherwise, both Michael and Pamela would have inevitably been the laughingstock of Hollywood. So I guess it was their destiny. Indeed. Additionally, we must consider another crucial point. And that is Warner Bros. Had friction with several actors and directors recently due to their decision to go directly to streaming all their premiere catalog of 2021 with the intention of increasing home box office max subscriptions during the pandemic. Why would anyone get angry about that? Very simple, my dear bewildered young man. It turns out that several of those involved in the films earn a part of their salary from a percentage of the box office. And if there's no box office, those people don't get paid. Correct, the perfect crime. For example, Christopher Nolan had a big fight with Warner over this and chose to go to Universal to make Oppenheimer. Let's say then that Warner wanted to take care of the talent it still had left. A practice that is not new, as Disney once gave Robin Williams a Picasso as an apology for using the genie's voice against his will in merchandise related to the Aladdin movie. On another occasion, Warner hired a full symphony orchestra to score the Tiny Toons cartoon at Steven Spielberg's request. I suppose Todd Phillips can't complain since Warner gave him everything he wanted. And 20 million.
To be able to create Joker to Melly. Folie à deux, folie à deux. That's what I said. Yes, but what about Lady Gaga? Many say that she had something to do with the failure.
We definitely need to talk about that because Lady Gaga is exhibiting a fascinating trend. Many online users blame her for the failure of Joker 2. Why do they blame her? There are several reasons. Some claim the movie was made as a musical to please Gaga or that she was involved in the script and creative process. However, by the time Gaga was hired as Harley, Todd Phillips already had the movie concept approved by Warner. A concept that Joaquin Phoenix dreamt up. No joke, that's how The Hollywood Reporter presented it. In a recent interview, Gaga mentioned that her creative freedom for this film was limited to interpreting her character and appearance. In other words, Gaga had nothing to do with the story as all those garbage pages claim. Interestingly, other pages accuse her of being a kind of bad luck charm for productions through memes like this, implying that all her movies fail. But this is also not true, as A Star is Born managed to gross more than 12 times its budget and was highly acclaimed by critics. So it seems more like I'm against Lady Gaga. The only woman around, how convenient, isn't it? Jared Leto, who also appeared in House of Gucci, has had both critical and commercial failures in his career. Sometimes critical and commercial failures. Like Morbius, which Suicide Squad. Ridley Scott also failed in directing House of Gucci, Napoleon, and The Last Duel. Which one is that?
Exactly my point. But why do you think people are criticizing Lady Gaga more than Joaquin or Todd? Unfortunately, my dear troubled young man, many of...
The criticisms originate from an internet faction obsessed with a cultural battle, constantly complaining about woke content. Several low-quality Facebook pages falsely claim that the new Joker film's failure is due to its progressive themes, dubbing it The Walker. A clever name, but an entirely false assertion.
But what's progressive about the movie? I mean, there is...
A woman, right? According to what these pages say, the movie gives an empowering feminist message through the character of Harley, the psychopathic manipulator who faked a pregnancy and who is obsessed with Joker. The situation becomes even funnier when we remember that 4 years ago, the Birds of Prey film was also heavily criticized for its supposed feminist message, as it presented all the men in the film as bad and the women as good. Here the opposite happens. Harley is presented as the abuser. Is this also considered feminist? By Minces. The reality is that there is no feminist message that can be considered progressive in the film. If you didn't like the movie, it has to do with a matter of script, focus, or simply because you didn't like what they did for Arthur. But in a time when we are forced to have a radical opinion in favor or against something immediately, well, it's easier to blame the enemy of the woke by Minces. Something that is taken advantage of by these garbage pages with the intention of generating clicks just because there is a female co-star who made us notice how sad, pathetic, and disturbed Arthur's character is.
Fleck. But then, who is to blame for the death of this box office? In the specific case of Joker Burrito? That's not even French anymore.
It should be clarified that there are many people involved in this box office crime. Joaquin proposed making the sequel a musical, which alienated some viewers. However, Warner's co-presidents approved the concept and financed the film. Todd Phillips was at the center, conceiving the script, approach, and direction for Joker 2. The public mainly disliked the story's ending, not the musical aspect. Reports suggest Phillips had extraordinary autonomy and freedom, with minimal supervision, as the film was approved during a chaotic period for DC Comics' film division. Months before James Gunn and Peter Safran were appointed in charge, so Gunn had nothing to do with it. I've seen a lot of people complaining about James Gunn, but I think it's more out of habit, as both Gunn and Todd Phillips have publicly stated that James had nothing to do with the project. In fact, the film didn't even have test screenings, which speaks to the level of power and autonomy that Todd Phillips had when making this film. That was the movie Todd Phillips wanted to release, whether we like it or not. In the words of an insider also published in The Hollywood Reporter, Todd has always trusted his instinct, and this has taken him quite far. And it's true, let's remember that he was the one who created the Hangover franchise. And Joker, two highly successful projects that defied initial low expectations. This movie became one of DC Comics' worst commercial failures. But there's a twist in the plot, my distraught young man. What is it? Remember what I said? That was the movie Todd Phillips wanted to release. Regardless of whether we like the Joker 2 movie or not, it must be said that it did have a very clear intention. Think about this. In the first movie, we are told that Arthur is a man who is beaten down by society until he explodes and becomes Joker, a character who is adopted as the symbolic leader of a social revolution.
But that was never Arthur's intention.
He committed his crimes motivated solely by emotion and personal resentment. And if they were successful, it was purely by luck, as they were not planned crimes either. However, people seem to have seen something else. In the world of Joker, they saw a revolutionary leader with an anti-system message, while in the real world many people thought that this Arthur would be some kind of criminal genius who would take Gotham City by surprise in the sequel, just as happens with his comic counterpart. I even saw people wanting Arthur's Joker to face off with Batman and then Robert Pattinson's. Something that from the first film they tell you is not feasible. Idealizing the Joker is very distracting. Yes, but the thing is, the Joker man weighs a lot, and that's what's truly interesting. Both we and the people of Gotham City attribute to Arthur qualities that simply were never there, so the end of the film feels like a meta-story where both we and they are disappointed to see that this Joker we idealize simply never existed. And when what we love ends up not being the way we believed, we end up hating it. So the failure of the movie proves the point of the movie. The message and concept's execution quality is a separate matter. The script's quality is a separate matter. Beyond whether the movie was good or we liked it, we must ask ourselves a very important question. Should art be pleasing? Both Warner and Todd Phillips knew the type of movie and ending that fans of the Joker sequel were anticipating. But in this case, Todd Phillips took the bargaining power he had and decided not to do it. If Joker 2 had followed the most expected path, it likely would have been better received by audiences and earned more at the box office, which would have also left Warner very satisfied. However, we have to ask ourselves what the long-term consequences are of generating purely artistic products that are complacent and do not take risks. Products that are formulas that are repeated over and over again instead of generating new ideas. Personally, I think that would be a much greater crime, since I am of the idea that art should seek to give the public what it needs and not always what it wants. In this case, the creative gamble that Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix carried out did not click with either the audience or the critics, but personally, I admire that they had the courage to deliver their message just as they wanted. A message that echoed and had repercussions both in fiction and in the real world. Which leads me to think that the message of this movie was not as poorly executed as many claim. That's all for today. I am Detective Go, and the distraught young man, and this case is closed. And this case is closed. And this case is closed.
You think you see everything very clearly, don't you, Detective Go? But I get the impression that you have no idea what you're up against. Soon you'll see the role you play in my plan, and when you see the resolution, you'll know who you're dealing with.
Thank you.